Hi, Joy Olson here of Blockbuster Fundraising. This year of 2017, the month of September, we've been in the face of so many disasters. I mean, it started out with Hurricane Harvey, Irma, we've had earthquakes, Puerto Rico, and we saw a lot of fundraising experts talk about, can we fundraise in the face of disasters, and how do we do that? And I thought that today I would take a compilation of some of those different articles, blogs that I've read and put them all together, okay? When I first reported on this way back with Hurricane Harvey, I really talked a lot about the agitator and what they were saying. I thought that it was really relevant. So today, like I said, it's going to be a compilation. I'm going to start with Marc Pitman, who certainly is no stranger to people that are interested in fundraising experts, but he talked about two different ways to respond to a tragedy, like the devastation that people are experiencing in the hurricanes. And he shares this with us, and I think that you will appreciate it. He says that disasters like this pull on our hearts and pull on the hearts of our donors. And we all make donations to support those affected. I certainly have, and I know you have too, and you just feel like you can't do enough. And if your nonprofit isn't in an affected area, disasters like this can make it challenging to think about fundraising for your own institution, because you just feel like there's so many people that are just facing such devastation that you should be helping them instead of your own mission. Well, Marc Pitman says that having worked in nonprofits through many disasters, whether they're weather, economic, or even terrorist, he says, I've had to help nonprofit leaders figure out how to reconcile their desire to keep with their need to fund their own organization. And he says he'll share two different approaches to us in the wake of this kind of disaster. He says, as nonprofit leaders and fundraising professionals, if we live outside the affected areas or outside nonprofits providing assistance, these approaches can help us. He says, one thing you can do is to pause your fundraising. And just simply pause your fundraising. Marc Pitman says that he thinks this is the most common response he's seen, and he says that it simply seems sometimes the right thing to do. It seems respectful and considerate. But the one big mistake he says that people make with this approach is to equate, quote, pausing fundraising, quote, with ceasing all communications. And he says, don't do that. You should definitely check your upcoming communications and social media posts to see if they'll appear tone deaf to your audience. But do not stop talking to your supporters. Your cause is still worthy of philanthropic support. The need that you exist to fix isn't going to go away. So neither should you. In pausing your solicitations right now, you may choose to devote your major gift calls to expressing your gratitude. Good plan. Call donors and say thank you. You may even consider sending a postcard to supporters, thanking them for their support of your mission and encouraging them to support one of the groups your own organization is making donations to. Hitting the pause button, Marc Pitman says, can be a reasonable approach to fundraising in the wake of disasters. Second thing you can do is fundraise carefully. If your organization still needs funds that you were planning on soliciting right now or this week, perhaps you had a direct mail going out, you still need to get out there and raise those monies. But this week, as you make your major gift contacts, listen, he says, with your heart, even more than you normally do. Even if you're far from Texas, Florida, Mexico, Puerto Rico, a lot of your donors may have family that's really hurting from awful stories that's happened to their own friends or family, or they're just feeling devastated by the news. A lot of people are devastated by the news right now. So you want to hold that space with your donor. Be a safe person to help them start processing their grief, their worry, their anguish. Marc Pitman says, be human, be full of care. And still ask. If you've got to ask, you've got to ask. If this was your plan and your mission is counting on these monies right now, you might modify your ask amount, or you might see perils of your mission and things the donor has said, but your cause is worthy of the funding. Okay? And finally, Marc Pitman suggests a third way to fundraise in a disaster situation that we faced this September of 2017. He says a third way is to do both. Both pause with some prospects and ask carefully with others. He says it's times like these that we get to see the best in each other. And hasn't that been true? I mean, don't you love some of these news reports that we've seen people just go to the ends of the earth to help one another? And as nonprofit leaders and fundraisers, we get a front row seat to that beauty and generosity. So that is what Marc Pitman has to say about disaster fundraising. Now let's take a look at another expert. Another great disaster fundraising article was written by Gail Perry, and I think it's really quite terrific. And so I'd like to refer to it right now. She talks about disaster fundraising and what you need to do. And first of all, she says you need to respond carefully. Carefully. Communications with donors need to be precise and convey the correct tone. So remember that. You've got to be, you can't be cavalier about disasters like this. It's affecting a lot of people. Even if your organization is not directly involved in a disaster response. A lot of your donors have friends and family and that are really affected by what's going on right now. So she asks the question, how should your nonprofit respond when natural disasters, wars, or crises strike? And here is Gail Perry's suggestions and advice. If you are not engaged in a disaster response, do these 3 things. 1, tell your donors how you are trying to help out. If a disaster is on everyone's minds, your donors will want to know that you are mobilizing somehow, some way. Like say if you're a humane society and the hurricanes have really dislodged all kinds of pets from their homes and owners, and a lot of the humane societies like in Texas or Florida can't keep the animals that they've got, then you can step in and help out and bring animals into your humane society. And you want to let your donors know that you have mobilized and you are helping in some way. And your donors are going to want to know how you're pitching in to help the situation. Okay, number 2, recommend some places for your donors to give. And Gail says, yeah, that can be really awkward. But if your donors are concerned and even obsessed with the situation, it's perfectly appropriate to recommend trusted nonprofits for contributions. And you can discuss this with your executive director and your board members and come up with some trusted opportunities to help. And third, Gail Perry says, is delay soliciting your donors for your own cause. She says she'd recommend stepping back and waiting for a few weeks. And it seems like every single week we have a new disaster lately. My goodness. So for those of you that were planning a big fall letter or a fall fundraising campaign, this has certainly put a pause in your plans. So Gail says that it would really seem self-serving or even tone deaf if you sent out a passionate appeal for your own work while your donors are so concerned about the hurricanes and the earthquakes. Timing is everything. But your communication, she says, needs to be very soon after the event. If you wait a few weeks, she says, that may seem awkward and ill-timed, and the disasters will no longer be top of your mind with donors. Well, that's a little difficult lately because it seems like, as we mentioned before, every week, I'm sorry to even bring it up, but you know it, there's been a new disaster. So you have the choice now of staying silent or showing up after the events as helpful and concerned. Okay, that's if you are not engaged in responding to disaster. But what about if you're one of the nonprofits that are engaged in responding to the disaster? Well, Gail says, and I'm sure you've done this and did do this, is connect with your donors immediately, right now. Share the facts immediately with your donors. Your donors want to know exactly what's going on, and they want to know what your program people are seeing out there in the disaster areas, and you want to give them as many specifics as you can of people impacted, the extent of the damage, etc. You want to help your donors feel the danger, the excitement, and the turmoil of the real situation. 2, give your donors frequent updates from the field. And, we all worry about what to say to our donors in times like this, or how to contact them and how often to contact them. Well, here's perfect opportunity when a disaster strikes and you are involved in some way of servicing this disaster to let your donors know what's going on and making your donors feel like insiders. So Gail says that remember, your donors love you and your work, and so they want to know what's going on. And thirdly, she says, be specific about what you are doing for the recovery effort. They want to know exactly what you're doing. Are you cleaning up? Are you serving meals? Are you helping the lost animals? Are you helping the homeless? And be very specific about the numbers of people that you are mobilizing and how you are helping. And 4, ask donors for generous gifts to fund these specific initiatives that you're taking care of. So you're experiencing a terrific time to be asking if you're involved in these disasters. Donors really expect you to be asking at this point, and they want to know what you need and how much you need and what you need it for. So if you're not asking right now, your donors are going to be wondering why. And 5, she says, call your major donors personally. By all means, be in touch with your major donors. That is so important. That's always important, but especially now because your major donors feel like they're in partnership with you and they want to help you and they expect you to be asking for what you need. And 6, Gail Perry says, stay accountable. Never, ever just take the money and run. Your donors deserve updates over time. You want to be completely, totally, awesomely transparent about how the money has been spent, is being spent, or will be spent, okay? You want to take this opportunity not only to help, but to build trust and credibility and a closer relationship with your donors. You don't want them to mistrust you. So, what do I do? What do I do? This will come to you if you're involved in a disaster area from your donors. So, you need to have a few answers. Of what they can do now, have projects, because the hurricanes and our wildfires out here in the West, the earthquake in Mexico, and now Puerto Rico, what can I do? That is a really good question. So, fundraising options following a disaster is it's a motivator. People want to get involved. And if your nonprofit's mission is to provide services after disaster, this is your time to shine. So you want to show lots of photos and videos of your team in action and ask for support. For all the rest of us, all other nonprofits, proceed cautiously. After these natural disasters, we have two choices. We can choose business as usual, or we can choose to pause our fundraising. It really depends on your situation and where you're located. But if you're not in an area affected by the disaster, you may want to wait a few days to a couple of weeks after the disaster happens and then move ahead with your plans. The eyes of the world stay on the affected area for a while. And many of us realize right now and worry a little bit that it won't be nearly long enough for many of these areas to recuperate. It's going to be a long, long time. So it's really a judgment call as to when to proceed with promoting your own fundraising, your own events. But after waiting just a bit and being very empathetic and reaching out to your donors and letting them know that you are very worried about the situation, let them know if there's any way that you are helping, then you need to proceed cautiously, but you still need to raise money for your nonprofit. You don't want to come across as insensitive. There's a fine line, Gail says, between being selfish and staying true to your mission, and this is your time to figure it out. So if your organization serves those affected by the disaster, such as after-school programs, food pantries, legal aid, etc., you have a valid reason to tie in the emergency and say, those we serve will need us now more than ever. If your nonprofit doesn't serve people with basic needs this way, you should be very careful. Don't try to tie into the disaster with your fundraising. Gail puts it this way, don't jump on the Me Too bandwagon. Better to be real and authentic than trying to stretch things too far. Okay? So, here are 4 tips for raising money after a disaster. Okay, you ready? We'll wind this up. Round up the 4 tips here. Be sensitive. It's not a good idea to ask for money right now when the disaster is just in the midst of figuring out all the suffering and the lives that still may be at risk. It's just not a good time. Number 2, stay focused. When you decide to move forward with your fundraising activities, don't give part of your donations anywhere else. Stay the course. Stay focused. All right? You need to stick with your mission. 3, adjust as needed. You may need to tweak your timeline just a bit to give folks a chance to emotionally recover from all these disasters in September. Your fall letter may be turning into a Thanksgiving letter. And the experts point out, and Gail did too, that compassion fatigue is a real thing. And people do start to numb out after days on end of hearing about all this devastation. So, if you're not sure how folks are feeling, ask. Survey some of your donors. On the phone, call. Find out what they think and how they feel. If 3 of your top donors think you should wait a little longer before you hold your big fundraiser or send out your big direct mail piece, then you might want to seriously consider that. Feedback is always a good thing. Brainstorming is always a good thing. And knowing your audience, number 4, that's the tip. And that's what these phone calls are about. Know them, because you really need to know your donors for all fundraising appeals, whatever you do for your fundraising mission. Most people will donate in some capacity to support recovery efforts from a major disaster. I mean, we all feel the tug on our heartstrings. And I'm sure that all of us right now have made 3 or 4 donations, at least in the last few weeks. But we really have to get to the point that, what can I do? You've helped, you've tried, and now we all have to remember that our mission counts too, and that we have to move ahead focused and compassionate for the people or the animals or the situation that we are all helping, and the impact, the great impact that we're making. All right, well, I think that is some of the best advice out there, and there's just been so much worry and so much sadness about what these people in the affected areas face, that we all wonder how in the world they have the strength and the courage to forge ahead. So we know that our hearts will be with them for many months to come. We know that the devastation is real, and yet we know our nonprofit work is still needed. All right? So some of the experts say that in the last 20 years of economic busts and natural disasters, the knee-jerk reaction seems to be to undervalue our own work and to stop fundraising because it feels selfish or wrong. But in reality, it's the groups that get stronger out of recessions or disaster. They keep some level of fundraising going throughout. All right? So, stay the course. Be empathetic, be compassionate, pause, but stay the course. All right, well, this is Joy Olson of Blockbuster Fundraising saying goodbye for today. We really wish that September 2017 had been a much gentler time. The world is certainly having disaster recovery efforts, it seems, almost everywhere, but we will all recover from crisis and move forward. And we're wishing you all the best and saying goodbye for today. Joy Olson of Blockbuster Fundraising, blockbusterfundraising.com, joyolsongroup.com, and you'll find hundreds of free fundraising tips on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much, and we'll catch up with you again on our Fall Fundraising Festival. Bye-bye, and thank you.